like a lot of you, I was pretty upset and frustrated and incensed by the injury or the re-injury that Tua suffered in Thursday night's loss to the Bengals in Cincinnati. Look, Thursday night football isn't safe for anyone with a helmet on in the NFL. It's not. Tua was re-injured on a sack tonight, and the football world or the professional football world is up in arms about the Dolphins training staff, as they should be. Tua shouldn't have been playing tonight. That's clear. He damn sure shouldn't have been gone back out on the field on Sunday against the Bills. You know, if you're talking about player safety being the utmost concern, I'm sure that he passed some tests to get back on the field. Look, I don't know. Here's a newsflash: tests and data and science does not always work with people, with human beings. You can blame anyone you want in this situation that's involved with it, or revisit the issues as much you want, and I will co-sign that because player safety should be of the utmost concern. I'm fine with that. It's clearly not by the NFL. I think player safety should be a real focus, a point of emphasis, to use a legal term, by the teams, the league, but the most hypocritical to me is the NFLPA. No, I'm sorry. Thursday night football is not safe. It wasn't for Tua, and the NFLPA has never taken a stand on that issue. They're going to take a stand, and they have already, on the Tua issue. That is a facade. We don't need science or data or anyone from the NFL or even in the comment section here, like showing up and parroting out data. Oh, injury rates aren't significantly different on Thursday night football than on Sundays. That's because the players are human. They're not robots, okay? So they have emotions, they have motivations or things they're driven to do, or even the next level of motivation and driven, which is obsession. Things they're obsessed to do. When you're obsessed to do something, you will get up and do it if you're sick. You will get up and do it if you're tired, if you're hungry. They're competitors. And they would force themselves to play on a Saturday, a Friday, or even a Thursday if their teammates and their fans needed them to and were rooting for them. They're competitors. The NFL's taking advantage of that, and the NFLPA is part of the problem, for real. I'm sure, well, the NFLPA called for an investigation into Tua being allowed to return to Sunday's Week 3 win over the Bills, right? They already did that during the week. Now they'll call for another one, presumably, after Tua was re-injured. And I won't be showing an injury pic or a video or anything here. I'm just fired up about it because as a player and as a man who's getting older, I find myself being more player-centered, and I find myself being more protective of younger people because I'm old. I'm going to be that old guy on the corner at some point who is trying to protect all the young kids. It's hypocritical if you ask me. And I wonder why the NFLPA and some of the people out there on social media who are so quick to criticize the Dolphins training staff won't take the next step. They won't take a real stand and question the existence of Thursday night football in the first place. It's not safe. No amount of data, no amount of doctors' pledges, no pregame or halftime interview with sponsored medical staff will ever make it true. It's just not safe. No other level of football does this. Actually, there is one, and I will address that later with an anecdotal story. It's hypocritical, and Ravens fans, we can relate. Look at the Thursday night debacle in Miami in 2021. The Dolphins won that game straight up. Like, let's give them credit and move on, all right? And then they beat us again this year. Ravens played a 1 p.m. game on a Sunday against Minnesota at home. We won in a thrilling comeback and then had to somehow game plan and turn around and take a flight to Florida like less than 72 hours later to go play against the Dolphins in terms of the flight down there 72 hours later. Dolphins had to do the reverse this week. Fly into Cincinnati less than 3. I didn't even know there was an airport in Cincinnati. I've flown into Cleveland like a dozen times, but I didn't know there was one there, but apparently the Dolphins did it. Tua had to do it while trying to recover from a concussion and then get on a plane and get ready to play against one of the top defenses in the league. And then let's get, you don't need to say it. It's the truth of the matter is the only reason Thursday Night Football exists is money. And because a lot of people up the food chain and a lot of entities are getting their cut along the way, right? If you think the NFLPA is not a part of that process, like I don't know what to tell you. They have apparently approved of the schedule while somehow retaining their legitimacy as a players' organization. Go figure. High schools don't play 4 days later. Yeah, I mean, sometimes high school teams will play on Thursdays, but that's because the previous week's game was on a Friday. You're generally talking about a 6-day recovery time, and two of those, the immediate 2 days after the game, the Saturday, Sunday, if you play on Friday, are recovery days. Monday is a day that, in our state anyway, Maryland, you can't put on pads. It's shells. So it's helmets and shorts, depending on the part of the season. Or it's, helmets, shorts, shirt, sweatpants. But it's no shoulder pads, no contact event. Now look, if you're in a football crazed state like Texas or Florida, the playoffs, at some point are going to begin. Hopefully for you. And they might have like 40 teams in the playoff bracket and only 30 or 32 days, I think, to figure out a state champ. So do the math on that. At some point, you got to play on 5 days. So they'll cut the schedule down to 5 days occasionally. I object to that. Colleges play a Thursday night game occasionally, but that's normally after they've played on a Saturday the week before. So again, it's a 5-day recovery period, right? They do play on Saturdays and college generally, and that's because they don't want to compete with the NFL on Sundays, which is the whole point about Thursday night football. That's the whole reason there is Thursday night football is because the NFL doesn't have anyone else to compete with on Thursday. And because no one up the food chain, down the food chain, whatever, in the media, even those people who never see the forest for the trees, no one would accept games on a Wednesday night, right? Some 72 hours after competing on a high-level NFL game on a Sunday. So that's why we have Thursday night football. There's no one else for the NFL to compete with, so they can focus the entire media and fan apparatus on one matchup. In this week's game, the case was the Bengals and the Dolphins. It's all hypocritical, in my opinion. It is. Let's do it this way. Why aren't there 2 or 3 games on Thursday night football? Why aren't there 2 or 3 games? Because the NFL wants everything focused on that one game. It creates an artificial swelling of the product for one matchup. That's Thursday night football. And they get all of our attention. And the only guy, I got to give credit to someone, man. And it's someone who I find myself agreeing with on so many things more and more as the years go on. Maybe it's because he's got old man syndrome like I do. It's Richard Sherman. He's the only guy who I'm aware of that originally called out the hypocritical nature, the overall hypocrisy of Thursday night football. I'm reminded of this article that he wrote, I think, for the Players Tribune in 2016. Yeah, there it is in the top left. I see things that he says about football technique, about coaching on Twitter, and I'm like, I find myself retweeting it. And I'm not a retweet person. Like I'm not a Twitter person. I don't really know a whole lot about it. But I'm just showing you this opening paragraph for his article from December of 2016. You can read it as you wish. He's right. Now he was smart about this. His original objection, I think, was about, he called it a poop fest. He was talking about the quality of the game, the quality of the product, and he's right. He's absolutely right. Or he was absolutely right. But it goes a little beyond that, and I think that was a smart way for him to introduce or to go into his point, calling it a poop fest. And then he went into, in the article, the injuries, and he gave a well-documented interview about that. But maybe I'll link this article for it. You can go back and read it if you wish. Then 2 days after this one, because I went and did a little research tonight, 2 days after this one, The Guardian and a couple of other like mass media places went and did articles like showing the science behind, whether or not it's safe. It's not safe. There's no science, no data that's going to illustrate that and convince me of that, or anyone who's ever been involved with the game. It's not safe. Richard Sherman was willing to be the bad guy because he knows that sometimes to be the good guy, you've actually got to appear to be the bad guy in the situation. And he was that person initially up front. I believe the person the player he used as an example was J.J. Watt. I think J.J. Watt suffered a season-ending injury a little bit before this article, and he references it in the article. Again, I'll link it in the description. You guys can check it out if you want. And look, it goes even worse than that. It's all up and down the football food chain that this happens. I don't want to support Thursday night football at all, me personally. There's only one good thing that can come out of this Tua injury or re-injury is someone, in the NFL somewhere realizes that Thursday night football could actually damage the product long term. But I think once again, it tells us what the NFL thinks of us. As long as they keep churning out these Thursday night games, we're going to kind of forget at some point about Tua being put in that situation. Yeah, the Dolphins training staff, apparently made a mistake. It appears like they did to me. Dolphins coaches probably too. Like somebody in the room's got to be like, okay, Tua might be healthy, but it's a 17-game season. What they're going to do is they're going to force teams to make decisions with quarterbacks or any position, but we know quarterbacks is what people focus on. Like, okay, we're going to keep him out of this Thursday night game to minimize the risk for injury for him. That's Monday morning quarterback stuff from me. But at some point, teams are going to look at the pattern of injuries or serious injuries, and make decisions to safeguard their players. They should do that at least. In case you're not aware, this happens in youth football, and it's sickening to me. I've been involved with it, and so I want to tell you why I'm a little bit passionate about it myself. And you can choose not to listen at this point if you wish. That's no problem. Maybe you're not aware of it. There's this thing called the Youth Football National Championships. It's called the AYF, and it's for kids as young as 8. And it goes up to like 14 or 15 or maybe even 16. I'm not sure. Now, I do know personally about this stretch of games and this intensity because we were invited to it 3 years in a row. I coached a youth football team at some point. We won our league all 3 years. And we were invited to try to qualify for what's called the Nationals. All we had to do was win one game. And that was made clear to us many times. I mean, multiple phone calls. Coach, all you got to do is win one game and you guys can go to Florida. Coach, all you got to do is win one game and your kids can go to Florida. And some of the people, it wasn't just local people, talking to me. It was people calling me from like the state level, and even one rep from some entity in Ohio called, hey, Coach, this will be a great opportunity for your kids. Your kids will get to go out of state. Like the kids that I coached had never been out of state before. Like they were just assuming things about the kids that I coached because the area that we were from. And other teams would go. Other teams will win the league and they would go, or they would try to go, and fail generally. And parents would be mad at me because I would stand there right after we won the league and say, we're not going. We're not going. No. We were direct invited one time because no one accepted it. And I finally said to them, why do you think no one's accepting your invitation to go to play this one more game to try to qualify? Why don't you just let everyone go with absent play in one more game? And they would look at me like, what are you doing? I said this in front of like 60 people. Like, no one wants to go because it's not safe. The format would be you would go to Florida and you would play at minimum 2 games in 3 days. And depending on how you did, if you won one of those games, you got to advance. If you won 2 of those games, then you would survive until, usually it was 3 games in 5 days, sometimes 4. Tell me how that's safe. It's not safe. And I got criticized for it. I didn't care. I knew I was doing the right thing. I was a bad guy up front to everyone else, but I knew that I was doing the right thing. And the only reason I was able to do some of those things is because I had seen people in my adult life do that in other arenas, and it showed me the path that you can walk, and you can be okay, and you can be comfortable in that. I know I'm ranting, and if you don't enjoy this content, it's no problem. Like I said, I'm an old man now, so I got old man syndrome, and I like to complain. And watching Tua get re-injured, and then people, try to make excuses for it on the Dolphins, piss me off. And then also people criticizing the NFLPA coming out and tweeting, and not saying anything about the NFL and the existence of Thursday Night Football in the first place. That really pissed me off. But anyway, it reminds me of this coworker, and if you want to stop the video now, you can. But I ran into her recently. Her name is Miss Marlene. She's a little older. She's like 72 now, and she's retired. So she had time for me. One of those people. I didn't have time. I needed to go somewhere, but I said I'm going to give her 5 or 7 minutes because I remember something she did for me, and I want to make her aware of it. So I wanted to encourage her. I was 21 years old and working a job with this lady, Miss Marlene, and this was a long time ago. This was like 1999 or 2000. So at that point, checks got handed out physically. Okay, some of you are young, and so you may not, remember this. It was every other Friday. So that'll tell you about the type of job, right? When they give you a check physically every other Friday, they're usually trying to keep you coming back. It's usually not a fun job, and this one was not. Anyway, it was like 6 of us in line to get our check, and someone up front starts getting a little upset in the accounting department. Like, you physically had to go pick up your check, all right? Checks didn't come, apparently, and there was no idea. I don't remember why. There was no idea why or how. Anyway, this coworker, she was very very kind, very gracious, very patient lady. We worked with kids. Her name was Miss Marlene, and she walked up to the front, and she found out that like half of the checks didn't come for some reason, and or they didn't print out. I don't recall exactly. And so you can imagine the accounting people, they were prepared for this. They knew that somebody was going to get pissed off. They just didn't understand what some people were made of in terms of their internal constitution. It reminds me of Richard Sherman. And what I recall is Miss Marlene, looking very directly at the accounting manager, and with a lot of dignity asked her, "Did you get your check? Did you get your check?" And the accounting manager said, "Yes, and I'm going to work very hard to make sure you get yours." Miss Marlene was like, well, I guess she'd be like 51 at the time, or something like that, 50. And she had a moment to think, and she turned and looked at us. She didn't smile. It was no wise assness, no sarcasm or anything. She got a chair, she sat down, and she blocked the door. It was the only door in and out of the accounting department. The only door in and out. And Miss Marlene looked at the accounting manager and said, if I don't get my check, then you aren't going home today. And she sat down. She sat down. She refused to move. Like multiple people said, Miss Marlene, will you please move and open this door? Because it was a door that opened inward into the room, and she had blocked it. So there was no way in unless you physically moved her. And our job, to be honest with you, that job was crisis management. We worked with adolescents who had difficult upbringings and various diagnoses in a lockdown setting. So it was not a fun job, you know. And Miss Marlene calmly said, I'm not upset. I'm not mad. I don't need to be talked down. I'm going to get my check, and you are too. Take a guess how the story ends. She got her check. And we all did too. She looked like the bad guy initially. She was not. She was the good guy. She did that for her, maybe selfishly, but like I encouraged her. I actually saw her this morning. I saw her, like I said, and I encouraged her, let her know that story encouraged me later on in life when there was opportunities where I could be the bad guy and get a little satisfaction in being the bad guy, because I knew that in reality, in the overall situation, I was really being the good guy. And it reminds me of Richard. It's so crazy, you know, sometimes serendipity or whatever you want to call it, duality in life. This situation, Richard Sherman was the bad guy in 2016, apparently, on multiple things. But now you look at it now, he's the good guy because he was right. Sometimes you got to have people like, you know, Richard Sherman or Miss Marlene or even me in the small situation I described. Despite what's said about you at the time, you got to be the bad guy. Here's why: because there's other people watching, and that encourages them to realize they can take that stand too, because it's the right thing to do, and because in reality they're not the bad guy in this situation. Now the overall situation we're talking about is Tua's re-injury, and the Dolphins are part of the bad guy process there, but they're not the main one. It's the NFL. Let me know what you think of this video, my little rant tonight. Again, it comes from a place of being protective of kids, you know, and Tua is not a kid. He's a player. So that's how I look at him because I'm old. I'm 46 at this point, and I got old man syndrome setting in early. Appreciate you guys checking the video out. If you enjoyed it, let me know what you think in the comment section.